So officially, good morning, everyone. I'm Randi Johnson. I'm an attorney. I'm an end-of-life doula. I'm a mom, wife, sister, daughter, all those things. And we were originally scheduled for this very time to go to a jump and bounce spot to give a presentation to typically moms of preschool-aged kiddos, talking about estate planning, which is a regular monthly event that we put on for our community. But given our quarantine status, we're not doing that. And we thought we would just kind of answer some of the general questions about estate planning that folks typically have when we meet and do like big general presentations. So I'm using that presentation about final arrangements and those plannings as my outline here today. So we're going to talk about what estate planning is, what it isn't, why you need a plan, what happens if you don't have a plan, and the topics we should be thinking about when we are in our personal and professional lives. So for ourselves, but also if you interact with folks who are needing to have these end-of-life conversations, hint, that's everybody, then these are conversations that I'm really trying to put into the movement to say, it's okay to talk about death and dying. It's okay to talk about end of life. It shouldn't be a taboo subject. We shouldn't have a lot of embarrassment or shame around it. And it should be something that we feel okay sitting at the dinner table to talk about, because I want to know what mom wants. I want my family to know what I want. And it shouldn't be under duress or under urgency that we have these conversations for the first time. So with that in mind, we'll start generally with, what is estate planning? I think a lot of people visualize estate planning as this dusty, boring, overwhelming project that's very transactional in nature, and it's only for the super wealthy, or if you are, by virtue of the life cycle, at 80 or 90 or 100 years old, that you should be thinking about. But really, this planning has to do with empowering yourselves and your families to make sure who the decision makers are and that your decisions are honored at the moment, especially if you're in a position where you can't verbalize those decisions and intentions. So generally, it's the way you assist your family, your loved ones, your team, if you are self-employed, and your community in the caring for you and the management of your stuff in the event you become incapacitated and at your passing. So pardon me, I'm just looking over here to switch my slides. So we think of estate planning, or the public generally thinks of estate planning as documents. I propose that we think of them as tools. You're always going to be in charge, but I may not always be able to discuss what I want while I remain in charge. So they're tools to make sure that my caretakers, my loved ones, know how to best care for me. More importantly, I think, as a true measure of your wealth, are creating a legacy. And we throw that word around a lot, and we say, well, I don't know, maybe I've got grandma's pearls, and that's cool, but that's not really what I'm referring to here. Legacy is your stories, your journey, your experiences. All of those things are incredibly important. And if we wait until the very end, that's really hard to encapsulate at that moment. So in my own personal life, my dad is 66. About 6 months ago, he was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. About a month ago, he had a bone marrow transplant, and things are pretty touchy. It's really hard for him to sit down and try to get a recording device in front of him and ask him a bunch of questions about his life. Like, that's not where we are. And I'd like to think, well, the typical person at the end of their days, or seeing, you're kind of seeing the end, is nearer than, where it would be otherwise if you were otherwise healthy. It's just not, I'm not necessarily wanting to focus on that, right? He wants to focus on getting better. He doesn't want to have conversations about the cool stories when he was 19 and 20 and 21. So I will probably lose out on that opportunity to capture those stories. So even though you have a family member who does this stuff for a living, they don't necessarily want to come to you to get that done. So, such as it is, I'm here to bring forward that awareness that we need to capture these stories, our own stories, not just our loved ones, but I have recorded my own story for my children, for my grandchildren, because if I just wait and try to get it done in the last 5 months or 3 months or 90 days, like it's hard. So if we do it as we go, in our office, we do it every 2 years, then we can say, well, what's happened since then? Well, Chloe's now 7. Okay, 2 years from now, she's 9. Let's talk about what's happened since then in our journey as a parent and our perspective. It's also peace of mind for you, the creator and author of this plan, and for your loved ones as a way to heal and to move forward. So what are those tools? So basically, there are 5 major kinds of tools. So the first one everyone thinks of generally, I think, is a will, and that's the tool that's at my passing. So I've died, and I say, hey, I nominate my husband, Chad, to administer everything. He's going to be my personal representative. In some states, it's called the testator, or I'm the testator. It's called the executor, who's going to administer everything and deal with the court if they have to, or deal with creditors or what have you. Well, it's pretty general, but it's also going to say, whatever you can find of mine at the time that is ready for distribution, I want you to give it to my children, and if they're not there, then to their children. If they're not there, you can kind of go on. But it doesn't exactly identify the things to be distributed. But you need one, because if you don't have one, you're forcing your family to figure out who should be in charge, and maybe you didn't want any of them to be in charge. Maybe you wanted your best friend to do it, but it'll just be a race. There's a lot of conflict. You can get really uncomfortable. And for those of you who have small children that are going to be watching, observing all of the grown-ups in their lives who are grieving and now angry, and I don't think anybody's children needs to witness all of that conflict and chaos, and they deserve better. They deserve to know that their parents, their grown-ups, all did this planning so that they remain feeling as safe as possible in light of the grief that's happening around them. Powers of attorney, so that is the decision makers that you should nominate in the event you're incapacitated, be it temporarily, you're going to get better and regain competence, or maybe don't ever get better enough to make your own decisions. So there's the person we nominate to make your legal and financial decisions. Flip side, there's the person that I'm nominating to make my medical or healthcare decisions. So some attorneys will put that all into one document. I do it in 2, and I think that's prudent because I don't necessarily think that the person who's qualified to make my healthcare decisions necessarily also needs the burden of dealing with my legal and financial decisions. That's a lot of responsibility in light of theoretically everything else that's going on. So I like to split it, but make a team out of it. Then there's the living will, and that's the document that's going to tell my healthcare agent what decisions I want made at end of life. So if I'm in a vegetative state, I'm on artificial hydration and nutrition, do I want to remain plugged into those modalities? If so, for how long? And if not, you're also relieving the burden of the decision maker, because they knew, Randi said, if she's on artificial hydration and nutrition, she doesn't want to be on life support, she's got somewhere better to be, please remove that. And now my loved one doesn't have to feel that burden or that guilt to have made that decision. So it's a really empowering tool. And for those of us who are still in childbearing age, maybe your decision is different if you are pregnant at the time you're on life support. There is a provision that says, affirmatively, if I'm pregnant and the physicians believe that they can bring that pregnancy to viability, then I'm to remain plugged in for as long as possible. Or you can say, nope, I want my healthcare agent to decide at the time. Or you can put in any number of conditions that is right for you and your family. But if you say nothing, if you don't execute this document, you are leaving it all up to whatever the chaos that's happening in the waiting room of the hospital at the time. Then you've got Your HIPAA authorization, I'm sure everyone is probably familiar with those documents, but it's the document that gives the decision maker, so the power of attorney, the ability to send and receive personally identifiable information. Years ago, that used to just be good enough to show the facility or the institution your power of attorney document, but now you also need a second of that HIPAA authorization. And then lastly, trusts. Trusts, that's a very general term, but basically a trust is a document that can get very specific, and it's very mission driven. So you can have a trust for almost any purpose, any legal purpose. And so it can be things like a special needs trust if the beneficiary is going to be relying on means-based government services like Medicaid, supplemental security income, things of that nature, and or they're not capable of managing their own funds. So you're creating a protective bubble of assets for them so that if they are a vulnerable person, you know, they won't befriend someone who's not out for their best interest and sign over all their money to them. So you can do a special needs trust, you can create a revocable living trust, and that would be something that I create for myself, and I put my assets into this trust bucket. Why? Because if I have everything into this bucket, I can avoid probate. My family doesn't have to go through the court system once I've died, because I already nominated a successor person in charge of my trust to distribute things, pay bills, pay taxes, do whatever needs to be done, and I don't need a court to tell my loved one what to do. So it can be very specific. So if you remember back, my conversation about the will is a general document, and it's going to say, whatever you can find, that's mine, distribute in the following ways. The trust is going to say, these are, I've identified for you, here's a schedule in inventory of everything that's in this bucket, and here's what I want you to do with each and everything. So, back to your stories. So we record those in our office, and I highly encourage each of you to really think about the experiences that you have, where you've been, the lessons that you've learned, the wisdom that you've gained over time, and what you might say to your spouse, to your partner, to your children as you go through life that you might want to impart to them if you weren't here anymore to tell them live. So, you know, we talk about family values, ways in which I would want the guardians to spend the money that I've left behind for my children. For some families, that's must be as conservative as possible in order to pay for college tuition. And for other families, that's like, look, just make them happy, help them maintain the same or similar quality of life throughout their childhood. And if there's 3 pennies at the end when they're 18, well, I guess you did your job right. And kind of everywhere along that spectrum. There's no right or wrong, but your guardians who raise your children will really, really want to know what you wanted them to do with that life insurance money, or after they've sold your house, or whatever needs to happen. And so as much guidance as you can give to those guardians, and sharing your stories, your true measure of wealth, to your children and grandchildren and so on, would be incredibly helpful. I know all of you have ancestors and folks behind you, your forebears, that have some incredible stories on how they got to you. And if you die with those stories, that's really a shame, because they're incredible, and that's how you are what you are. So my bottom line on that is your children and grandchildren will miss you. They will wonder if what they're doing would make you proud, what hopes and dreams you wanted for them. Records, recordings, and letters do really make a difference. My definition of grief is the path to reclaiming joy after a loss. And my particular spin on our mission at the law firm is that, children who grieve, because they will, when they experience a loss, they've got a road, right? And they're always going to wonder, what did mom think? What did dad think? And they're going to return to some level of normal, some new baseline, but the more information and the more planning and those stories that you can share with them, the more attached, the more connected that they will feel in being able to reclaim as much of that pre-death joy as they had, because our other practice area in our law firm is disability law. And what I frequently see in reviewing medical records is there's a pattern. And we all experience trauma, we all experience loss, we all experience grief, but how we experience the healing process subsequent to that loss or that trauma is really what makes the difference between folks who are ultimately at the end unable to adapt and continue to work and thrive and be and function, and the people who are not. And children especially deserve to play, they deserve that innocence of being around those situations that are developmentally appropriate for their age. And the first thing that goes in the face of trauma is play and imagination. And that frequently will lead to an adult who really has to work extra hard to identify their passions and their joys, because it's the same function, it's the same path of me playing with my Play-Doh versus me sitting here and dreaming up the birth of a brand new business or a brand new venture or something that I want to learn and grow and do. So how the story and the plan that we leave for our loved ones will really help them in their path forward even after you're gone. So the practical sides of things, even if you don't have lots of money, even if you're paycheck to paycheck, even if you own nothing, you lease a car, you rent a home, you just have one checking account to your name, there's still stuff to do. There's still paperwork to file and people to call and things to do when someone has died. And you want to make things as simple as possible. You want one place, one binder where you've got all the documents with policy numbers, people to call. I don't want my family to have to guess what my passwords were to get in to my bank and my life insurance and take my Facebook down. You know, whatever is important to you, don't make people guess. Because especially if you have a young child or you have a dependent that you're caring for, even if it's an elderly person that you're caring for, how would someone stepping into your shoes tomorrow be able to take over all your jobs? Do they know what medications they have to give to the other person that when they're now the new caretaker? Do they know who to call? Probably not. So you've got to really think about that. And that in itself can feel like an overwhelming task, but it really helps when you sit down with a lawyer and their team so that they can help you organize everything and make sure that you're not doing it alone and you're getting it all those things. Also, final preparations themselves, like what do you want your family to do? Do you want a celebration of life? Do you want a memorial? Do you want a viewing? Do you want your loved ones to wash your body? Do you want a doula to sit vigil with you and help your family so that they can just be and love on you and feel their own feelings and not have to think about interacting with the medical team? You know, you can have someone serving as an advocate for you and with you. You want to meet with a clergy member. Are there any final conversations or experiences that you want to have? Please don't make your loved ones guess what those things are, because they're also going to fight on, you know, whose idea of that final whatever thought or situation. They're going to fight over who's got the right idea of it. You are responsible for keeping the chaos and confusion at bay for your family. Don't let them fight when they should be gathering in love and in celebration of you. So peace of mind. It's peace of mind for your loved ones, especially those of our loved ones that have special needs considerations. If you are the caretaker for, say, a 40-year-old person with Down syndrome who's never lived independently and you are their primary caretaker and they live with you, what happens when you, the primary caretaker, are gone? Have you made a plan for them? What we frequently see out in the community is that 40-year-old now had no plan. He's now displaced. Frequently, he's now homeless. He's a vulnerable adult. He's a trusting person. People steal his money. And he's assaulted, and all sorts of awful things happen. But if that primary caretaker had put a plan in place for a standby guardian for that person and made sure that the money they left behind, let's say they had a $250,000 life insurance policy, that's awesome, except they didn't funnel it towards a special needs trust and now it's all gone. And while they were spending that down, we've kicked them off of Medicaid because the government thought that they were over-resourced. Well, shoot, you have $250,000. You can go ahead and pay cash for all your medical needs. And it becomes hard. It becomes really hard, especially if that 40-year-old person didn't have someone standing by to at least call a law office or call someone and help them navigate what those changes are. So peace of mind also for you. You should work with a legal team that you can rely on. Your life changes. There's different chapters and phases of your life. And when we do an estate plan, that's great. But you need to go and review it every couple of years. Every 2 to 3 years, you got to pull that, dust it off, and pull it out of your safe. Yes, I said a safe or a safety deposit box. It's not going in your underwear drawer. It's not going on a bookshelf. You're putting it somewhere safe. And you're going to look at it and we're going to say, did the rules change? Is there a law that's different? Do I hate the person that I nominated to do a thing? Or maybe they've moved to Africa and now you're in Florida and that doesn't make any sense anymore. Or did someone get sick? Like, it's just a good time to connect with the plan you've made and make sure it's still relevant. Otherwise, you'll have done all this planning for nothing. So that's kind of my general overview of estate planning and the tools that I think everybody should have. It's sort of like homeowners insurance. You have it, you know you have to have it, and you hope you never have to use it. I will tell you that my email address is Randi, R-A-N-D-I, @lilaccitylaw.com. Please email me. Our office number is 509-624-1610. I know that a lot of you who are listening do not live in Washington or Idaho where we can directly help and advise, but if you live in a different state, and you want help, I am happy to connect you with a trusted referral source, a colleague in those states that can help you get started, or even just to start the conversation and what you might need for your particular situation. And I guess we'll close out. So thank you, everybody.